Hi, Roy here, and welcome again to another edition of the Right Has Left podcast. I am your host, Roy Garton, and yes, we will be talking quite a bit about Iran, but first let's get into some other news that's going on in this fine world today. And of course, the breaking news from this past week, besides the war in Iran, is of course is the investigation of Kristi Noem. That is right, Trump finally got around to firing Ice Barbie after, many complaints from both sides of the aisle on the way that she has handled the Department of Homeland Security and handling of the ICE agents. And it was to be expected, but, for Trump to actually buckle down and do something after she finally embarrassed him, well, that was probably the last straw. So he announced on Thursday on social media that he was firing his Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem, and wanted Senator Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma. And if you don't know who that gentleman is, I'm sure you will, as he has to go through the Senate to be confirmed. And they do not expect any problems whatsoever in his confirmation because he, too, is a loyal Trump supporter. He is a first-term senator from Oklahoma, and picking him from Oklahoma means that they will have to replace him once he's confirmed. And, of course, Oklahoma being a very, very red state, there'll be another Republican to take his place in no time at all. So you'll hear more about Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma, but hopefully he will handle things a little bit differently for running the Department of Homeland Security and reining in the ICE agents and doing things just a little bit differently than Kristi Noem did. But there's a lot more to the Kristi Noem story. And, besides being stringed with a lot of controversies, she is the first cabinet member to be ousted in Mr. Trump's second term. She faced intense questioning this past week from congressional Republicans about a $220 million, let me repeat that, a $220 million advertising campaign in which she figured prominently, and you're watching that ad as I speak. And Mr. Trump said on Thursday that he contradicted her testimony that he had signed off on that campaign. Trump denied he knew anything about that as campaign expenditure. Now, whether he did or he didn't, of course, Trump's always going to cover his butt first and say he didn't know anything about it, and in turn he basically dismissed Kristi after that revelation came about because she said he did know something about it. Now, here's another thing that basically was the icing on the cake because of the investigation that the committee did, and that is the contract recipients and beneficiaries. Now, Safe American Media, they got $143 million, which was a primary contractor that received a significant portion of the DHS ad money. Now, this company was reportedly affiliated with a former political director of the National Republican Congressional Committee, a very firm tie to Noem. And the investigations by ProPublica, who put this information out, revealed that the company was created, an LLC, to basically try to hide this money just days before the deal was finalized. And they received those funds. Now, this organization is linked to the husband of Tricia McMullen, who is a former DHS spokesperson under Noem. Go West Consulting, they got $25,000, a firm that paid an undisclosed amount to a top aide of Noem, who was also working as a director for Noem's campaign and managing relationships with donors to American Resolve, another network of outside political groups supporting Noem. $10,000 bonuses were also paid and awarded, $10,000 checks to specific TSA agents during a government shutdown, ProPublica also reported. Now, this is a lot of money, folks, and as you can see, this is your taxpayer dollars. And here's Kristi Noem just basically shoveling off millions of dollars left and right to her buddies, the way they thanked him for supporting her when she was, in South Dakota. And here she is, as you saw that video, just riding around on horseback, telling everybody how, they better fall in line and they're going to deport all these illegal immigrants. And her little curly hair flowing in the wind, standing on her horse in front of Mount Rushmore and other places. It's just a sickening ad, and that is your tax dollars at work where she's trying to glorify herself. So you can see why Trump said, enough is enough. Now, going back to Mr. Mullen, he said he was open to hearing the concerns of Democrats who, again, blocked an effort to fund the Department of Homeland Security on Thursday. He's going to go before the Senate committee just pretty quickly here. Chuck Schumer of New York said that the new leadership would not change how Democrats' demands for restrictions on immigration enforcement. He said the rot is very deep. So, again, going back to the Democrats, here's what they want. They want body cameras and all of these ICE agents. They want them to remove these scars that they wear around their faces, like there's, we're cool. You don't need to know who we are, but we know who you are. And he wants identification on them, just like your standard street police officers. They don't wear masks over their faces, unless they're on a secret tactical drug bust or something like that, But typically, your police officers, when they approach you, you know who they are. They got identifications. They got body cameras on, so they can record what they're doing to protect not only themselves but you as well. That's what he wants that's what they want from the ICE agents. So it's not a huge demand. And now whether when Mullen's confirmed, of course, they'll ask him those questions and he'll agree to do that and go back to targeting, immigration enforcement instead of rounding up 3,000 people a day, whether they've committed crimes or not. That's what, the Dems want out of this. So we'll see what happens. But it's not asking a lot. And I think maybe some common ground hopefully will be found. Now, going on to other breaking news before I get into talking a little bit about Iran, House Republican leadership is calling on Representative Tony Gonzalez from Texas to resign from his seat. Now, he has already said he's not going to run for re-election, but they're still calling for his head and to just basically resign. But other Democrats do not want Tony Gonzalez to resign because they already have a thin majority as it is in the House, and if they let him go, to fill his seat with another Republican, the way Texas is starting to change a little bit, may be just a tad unreachable as far as the Republicans are concerned. But so anyway, they want him to drop his re-election bid after he unfortunately had an affair with Regina Santos Alvilles, who she also committed suicide, which would be, of course, a violation of House rules. Now, this is just a sad situation, these text messages, and, the suicide of Regina is just unfathomable. It's a very sad story, and it's sad that it happens. And I personally believe this guy needs to, get out of not only not a run again, but he needs to resign. And Tony Gonzalez, of course, he's standing ground that, he first went on and on, denied the allegations, and finally confessed that, okay, they're true, just like all of these idiots that, they run rapid in the House and have these affairs or whatever they do, child molestation, anything, and they all just shut up and, affairs with underage women. All these people just, shut their mouth and go on about it. But as soon as they are finally caught, then, oh, okay, I did it. I'm sorry. It was a bad moment. And they try to save their butts, House Speaker Mike Johnson, who's the majority leader, as you're well aware of, and Leader Steve Scalise, Majority Whip Steve Emmer, and House Republican Conference Chairwoman Lisa McClain, they're all calling for him to, resign. But some of the Republicans don't want it to happen. They're more concerned about their political futures and holding on if politics come before whatever, anybody else does, even though this woman committed suicide. It's sad that where you think your politics and holding on to your seat is just absolutely more important than removing somebody who committed a crime. And this basically is a crime. This woman committed suicide because of all this, And this guy's married, so... I beg to differ how, things like this is going to change anything, because it's not. And dear God, help us all when you've got politics that takes precedence over somebody's affairs and things like that. I don't know. Moving on with other breaking news before I, get into the main story here. The U.S. economy unexpectedly shed 92,000 jobs. That's right, 92,000 jobs in February 2026, making a significant downturn compared to previous months and pushing the unemployment rate up to 4.4%. 4.4%. Widespread losses were driven by a major healthcare strike, reduced federal payrolls, and a cooling labor market. And the New York Times reported that this just recently, and of course it made national news. Job losses, private sector jobs dropped by 86,000 with notable declines in manufacturing, information services, and transportation. Unemployment rate increased to 4.4% from 4.3% in January. December 2025 and January 2026 numbers revised down, indicating that employment growth was weaker than previously reported, with combined losses of 69,000 in those months. Underlying factors, of course, is the slump attributed to a combination of labor strikes, severe weather, and persistent economic uncertainty. And, of course, the long-term trends also play into this. Federal government employment has seen a decline of 330,000 jobs, or 11% of its workforce, since October 2024, thanks to DOGE. And the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the Bureau also mentioned about these losses as well. Now, some sectors did see some minor gains, such as social assistance, which added 9,000 jobs. No kidding, because now people need help because they don't have work. However, the overall data reflects a weakening labor market. So, as you can see there, excuse me, we've got all this stuff going on overseas in other countries, and this is the main factor that the American people care about, is their jobs, their own well-being, and their ability to have employment and make some money. And this current president is not doing jack about that here on our own homeland. He's spending billions of your tax dollars fighting a war in Iran and plus other countries, which I'll get into here in a minute. And we are in dire straits here in the United States, right here on our own turf. You know, people need work, and companies are laying off and not adding jobs. And of course, gas prices are starting to spike, and this has been the big complaint. This is why the Republicans in the midterms are in trouble, is because they're not taking care of business, and they have not followed through one iota about the things that they promised the American people. And for all these MAGA people that, put these, people in office, and they haven't done jack. And now the Republicans are running with their head between their legs, saying, well, we'll fix it. And as you can see, we are going in the tank, and nothing is happening. So let's now move on to our top story. And that top story, of course, is we need to talk a little bit about Iran. And Donald Trump says that he must be involved in selecting a new Iranian leader. The new leader must be somebody that he is going to be personally involved with, and being able to direct the future of which way Iran goes. And Trump, of course, none of these people actually have a game plan other than total surrender by Iran. And it's sad that there is no plan, and that's what everybody's complaining about. Both, even though Republicans, of course, the majority are all supporting Donald Trump on this, war in Iran, the Democrats are asking, well, what is your plan? What is your exit plan? What are you going to be doing? They don't have one. So it's other than Trump says he wants to be involved in the personal process of who's going to be taking over Iran. And he says the probably is going to be the son of the Ayatollah. And that is what most other people are saying, is the son is going to be taking over the succession of his father, who was just recently killed in this bombing. And, of course, as you're well aware of, they just recently went ahead and bombed the bunker again, because they felt that they were staying below. So they want to make sure everybody in the army and the guards were all killed. Now, whether the son got killed as well, they don't think so, because these reports say that he is still alive. Now, if the son does take succession, Donald Trump says that he really doesn't want him. He wants somebody else, but he's willing to work with anybody as long as they do a total surrender and that they can take over Iran. He called the son a lightweight, and he says, I have to be involved in the appointment, just like with Delcy Rodriguez in Venezuela. The president said Venezuela, by the way, as you haven't heard, has agreed to reestablish diplomatic relations with the United States, which means that the embassies, both on our turf and our embassy over there in Venezuela, will be reopening. So that's a good sign. Venezuela maybe might be coming around a little bit. So that's one victory for Donald Trump there. Of course, as you're well aware of, he has total control of the oil over there now and is putting all the millions and billions of dollars in offshore accounts. And he says he will distribute it back to the Venezuelan people and to the people here in the U.S. As he sees fit. So he's making billions of dollars off of this. And this is the whole thing with Iran, too. Yeah, we want to get rid of the dictator. That's a good thing. But again, the bottom line is Israel and the United States wants to control the oil there as well. So it's all about oil, folks. If you don't believe that, look it up. I'm not making this up. Yeah, they got a bad regime over there. Yes, they need to clean up their act. Yes, the Iranian people need to have a democratic election. And of course, Trump told them rise up and fight, but they're scared to death even to go out there and do anything. But it still boils down to oil, and it's there, right there, all right? So good thing of news about Venezuela, all right? Trump also stated this week that nothing less than unconditional surrender, as I just said, is all that he will accept from the Iranian people at this point. Trump is also, as you know, is doing a friendly targeting of Cuba. We are now going after Ecuador. And again, they're using that same excuse. They got to get the drugs from the cartels out of Ecuador. So now we are attacking Ecuador on top of having our people in Venezuela. We're now bombing Iran, and the other countries are getting involved. And he wants to go after Cuba as well. Can you see the writing on the wall, folks? Can you see this? We are inching closer and closer to a very large war. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be World War III, but boy, is the Department of War, as Pete Hegseth likes to call it, Pete Macho Man Buy Me a Drink Hegseth, is all happy about that we are just going to war over everybody and everything, and including Cuba, which is, okay, as you're well aware of, would really piss off Russia. And right now, we don't want to piss off Russia because right now, Donald Trump is calling for deregulation of Russian oil so he can get oil over here so he can get those prices down. Now, speaking of Pete Hegseth, he's facing some backlash over a video game mixed with real-time video promoting the war in Iran because he used some footage from the Call of Duty, which were inserted in those clips. And that video is running behind me right now. And as you can see, some of the clips from Call of Duty. Again, he made this video because he's trying to get support of the young people that are basically against the war on Iran. He thought that, well, this will be really cool. I can reach some of those Gen Xers by showing some of the stuff from Call of Duty, because that's what they do. They sit around and play video games all day. That's what he likes to think. And he's gotten a lot of criticism from it because, as you're well aware of, the war on Iran is not a video game. It's serious business, and we have already lost brave souls over there. And for Pete Hegseth to make a video like this, I mean, he's not over there fighting, and all these Republicans, their kids aren't over there, so what do they care? As long as I'm not involved, I think this is pretty cool, don't you think? And but that's the main reason. It was a marketing ploy. They're attempting to reach a younger audience and to make them justify the war over there, so they can get them on their side. Because right now, the young people and independent voters, they are totally against what's going on in Iran, and the Republicans need their votes, and they're not going to get them in the midterms with this kind of crap. Now, we also need to talk a little bit about the Straits of Hormuz, all right? And let's do that right now. because no oil is moving through there. That's why gas is hitting $3.50 a gallon and going up 11% in just a week. Now, the Strait of Hormuz is witnessing a near total halt in oil shipment and oil tanker traffic due to the Iranian-U.S. conflict, with about 20% of global daily oil supply being affected. Iran has threatened to block all shipments, resulting in at least 80% lower traffic and increased tax on vessels, causing shipping companies like Maersk to suspend operations. Now, 3 aspects of disruption of the Strait of Hormuz closure. As I said, Iran has threatened to block all oil shipments through this crucial 5-mile wide waterway, and they don't need to be in the water to do that. Being that it's only 20 miles wide, Iranian people and the military can conduct attacks right off the shore. Now, Trump says, well, we're going to get Navy vessels in there to escort these oil tankers through there. Whether that'll work or not, I don't know. But you got to understand, roughly 20 million barrels of oil a day goes through there. And the safety insurance risk, of course, the insurance is just going to skyrocket. And hopefully with the naval vessels escorting these oil barges and these tankers through there might lower the insurance rate. So there's a lot of stuff in play here. Not only the safety of the people who are, using these vessels and getting them through there, they're all insured, and the insurance companies won't cover these vessels going through there when you've got war going on. So that's what they're hoping to do. So there's a lot of stuff in play here. And shipping companies are suspending, rerouting, or canceling shipments because insurance costs have surged, obviously, and vessels are being targeted by drones and missiles from Iran. We already know that. And the impact on the global markets, the disruption has caused a significant spike in oil and gas prices, with global crude prices increasing by over 10%. Regional impact, while some like China are in negotiations with Iran to allow safe passage, many countries are experiencing supply chain, economic, and energy shortages. Thus, the U.S. saying they're going to deregulate Russian oil, so perhaps they can get some of that flowing our way. Now, the duration of this disruption, of course, is uncertain, and if it continues, it could have a significant long-term economic effects. Both House and Senate defeated a symbolic measure to tell Trump he was violating the Wars Power Act by sidestepping congressional approval for war against Iran. And as you're well aware, the Senate and barely the House of Representatives passed this. And even if it did pass on either side, it meant nothing because Trump can override that. It was basically symbolic. But, of course, the Republican-controlled Congress and the Republican-controlled Senate, they're going, no problem. You're good. Go ahead and fight. It's okay. We support you 100%. Whatever you want to do. And, with gas prices going up 11%, that's hitting the wallets of the American people, and they don't like that. And as you're well aware of, just 2 weeks ago, Trump was bragging about gas prices being the lowest ever under his administration. You may remember this, don't you? Look at this.
Prices are down on groceries. Prices are down for oil. Prices are down for all energy. Prices are down at tremendous numbers for gasoline. And let me tell you, when you have the big thing, what he did, he spent like a stupid person, which he was, but he spent like a very stupid person. And that was bad for inflation. But what really killed us with inflation was the price of energy.
And, of course, as you heard, he blamed Biden, calling him names and everything else. It was all Biden's fault that gas prices went up. Now whose fault is it? Donald Trump? Now whose fault is it? And, of course, with the Russian oil maybe flowing, that might get prices to drop a few cents. We don't know how that's going to come out. And, of course, moving on, some 24 states challenged President Donald Trump's new global tariffs on Thursday. Now we got a lot of people suing the U.S. government. They're filing the lawsuit over import taxes he imposed after a stinging loss at the Supreme Court that he faced. A lot of states are now suing, saying, we want our money back. And what about those $2,000 checks per person of the United States, Mr. Trump? Where are those checks at? You said you was going to do that. Well, the Democratic attorneys generals and the governors in the lawsuit argued that Trump is overstepping his power with a planned 15% tariffs on much of the world. So that's now coming into play because he was pissed off at the Supreme Court. So he said everybody's going to pay a 15% tariff worldwide. And he said those are essential to reduce America's longstanding trade deficit. He imposed duties under Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974 after the Supreme Court struck down tariffs he imposed last year under Emergency Powers Act. That's what he thinks he can do all of this with his powers, is he thinks he has authority to do everything. But when you got all these states now suing the U.S. government for wanting their money back and wanting refunds, he's not sure how he's going to handle that. So, with this war in Iran and we don't see an end in sight, and, the terrorists and, everything being ramped up so we can have these anti-ballistic missiles, defense systems. Trump is now wanting them to ramp up so he can, because again, Ukraine's not getting protected because they're pulling all the resources that are been used to protect Ukraine into the war in Iran, and all these other countries are getting affected. And now we still don't have boots on the ground, but Trump has not ruled that out, that we will have boots on the ground in Iran if things don't shape up quickly. The whole thing that's sad about all this, between Pete Hegseth, Donald Trump, and everybody else in the cabinet's involved, is the right hand does not know what the left hand is doing. You keep hearing different stories, even from the White House press secretary. She gives out different information than even Donald Trump himself gives out, and that gets pretty sad when nobody else knows what the left and right hand foot is doing. And I pray this thing comes to a screeching halt soon. Because as you saw from the job numbers and everything else, this whole thing is getting quickly out of control. You've got bad job numbers, you've got rising oil prices, and you've got gas prices going up at the pump, and people can barely afford their living paycheck to paycheck. And those people who do commuting and have to drive 20 or 30 miles to work every day, both ways, and you're getting close to $4 a gallon for gas, and with no end in sight, it's this is going to get very serious business. These people in Congress, they sit there on their hind ends, especially the MAGA Republicans and stuff. They don't care because they still get their fat paychecks. Most of them don't spend a dime for driving because they are chauffeured everywhere, so they don't know what the feeling is about you paying more at the pump because they don't have to pay. And if they do have to pay, they get reimbursed for everything they do, including hundreds of dollars a day for meals. You understand these politicians, ladies and gentlemen. You need to look into what kind of benefits they all get. They don't know what you are going through because they don't feel it. All right? They may say, well, I know how my family feels and all that. They don't. Or if they do, they don't give a rat. Okay? Because they get reimbursed for everything. There's not one dime that comes out of these people's pockets for food, for entertainment, for gasoline. It's all covered. The health care, they don't pay jack once they get in. That's why they love running for office, for House of Representatives and for the U.S. Senate, because they, like the president, don't have to pay a frickin' dime for anything, and they still collect a hefty paycheck for it. So, that's why you need to write your congressional. If you're against all of this, folks, and I know a lot of people out there, you need to reach out to your representatives, both in the Senate and the House, and say enough is enough, because they'll sit there on camera and smile at you and tell you how great everything is and it's going to get better. But, day by day, they don't know how you feel because they don't experience it. They may say they know how you feel and we hear you. No, they don't, because everything's paid for by them. You and I, we're the ones paying, all right? And that is my podcast for today for The Right Has Left. I hope you've enjoyed it. I look forward to your comments. And again, folks, let's hope that this conflict gets over to us soon, because Trump is now, as I just told you, he's got other countries in his eyesight, including our little friends to the south, Cuba. Well, some of you may not think they're friends, but again, if you don't understand the big picture, if you're going to mess with Cuba, then you're going to be messing with Russia, because they're the ones that control Cuba right now. And Cuba is just 90 miles right off our shores there, off of Florida. So, all right, you take care and you try to have a good week. This is Roy Gardner.